Hi, why should Kenyan Christians care about good government? Does the authority of government come from God or man? There is the liberal tradition and the consent of the governed, that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Then there is the Bible and what God has instituted. Where does the Bible say a government's authority comes from? From God. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed. For he, the one in authority, is God's servant. He is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath. Romans 13, 1-4. Why has God instituted governments? God has instituted governments for the rendering judgment, justice, the proximate cause. How does government do all this? By protecting its citizens, whether from threats from the outside or threats from the inside. It punishes Cain when he kills Abel. God has instituted governments for the sake of facilitating the creation mandate, which it does by establishing order, promoting virtue, and facilitating the growth of prosperity. Proverbs 29:4, by justice, a king builds up the land. It's likely that greedy interests would, from time to time, compromise various safety standards for the sake of financial gain. In other words, governments exist to build a platform on which human beings can pursue the creation mandate. It's a platform of peace, order, virtue, and prosperity, albeit one that should always be tied to the more foundational call to producing justice. In fact, there is an even more ultimate cause than this. God has instituted governments for the sake of his redemptive purposes, ultimate purpose. Why do you want a society to be peaceful and orderly? So that people can find their way to God and gather to learn about him. Look at Acts 17:26-27. He made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God, and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Why should Christians care about good government? Proximately, for the sake of justice. Ultimately, so that there's a platform for redemption. Care about and pray about good government because you care that people be saved. Bad government will hurt the church and hinder its witness. So for those of you who work in government, let me embolden you with this charge. We need you to make Kenya safe for Christianity, and I'm using the word need, not to override divine sovereignty. How should governments be formed? And is there a best form of government? Number 1, every human bears some measure of responsibility for good government. We are all responsible for fulfilling this basic requirement of justice, each for our part, whether through playing a role in government or through supporting the government. Number 2, we are charged with finding the best, most human-respecting form of government. God requires us to find the best means for establishing this reckoning, to knowingly build a governing system that yields a less than full reckoning, for instance, because it involves an excess of retaliatory violence, or because it involves economically or ethnically prejudiced judgments, is to disobey God. Third, God does not specify the precise form of government, but allows for some flexibility to adjust to dramatically different historical conditions. The best human institutions for accomplishing this mandate will change from one historical context to another. God uses a variety of forms to govern his own people. Family structures under the patriarchs, judges from Moses to Samuel, monarchy from Saul till exile, independent assemblies during exile. Number 4, wisdom, therefore, is a critical principle for good governance. Wisdom must be exercised for the very purposes of determining which decision or action would be the most just in any given situation. Proverbs 8:15 says the same thing. By me, wisdom, kings reign and rulers decree what is just. What are the limits of government? Number 1. The government itself is under and obligated by the Genesis 9:5-6 justice mechanism. Number 2. The grounds for civil disobedience are found in the justice mechanism. But what about when a government begins to act as an impostor by taking counsel together against the Lord and his anointed one, saying, "Let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us"? What if the government wants to forbid you from disciplining your children or gathering as Christians or speaking God's truth about homosexuality or sharing the gospel, or to force you to provide insurance for your employees to have abortions? You must defy it. Number 3. God authorizes governments to prosecute crimes against human beings, not crimes against God. Number 4. But a right view of human beings and justice depend upon a right view of God. Right governmental structures and policies, in other words, depend upon right theological grounds. Remove the ground and you remove the foundation of right constitutions and policies. Not only remove the ground, and it becomes more likely that governmental policy to warp from right to wrong, from just to unjust, and you can watch as the government earns its own just judgment. The government that denies God will not long remain a just government. Who should we vote for? We vote for the candidate. We support the party. We work on the legislation with a limited but clear view of what the government has been authorized and ordered by God to do, to render the judgment necessary for creating a platform for peace, order, virtue, and prosperity, a platform on which people are free and not hindered from knowing God and being redeemed. These are excerpts from What Christians Should Ask of Government to Establish Peace from the 9 Marks website. We need God's help. Your life is a gift and an assignment from God. This should infuse our life, its good and evil, its sweet and bitter, its health and affliction, its prosperity and poverty, its comfort and suffering, with an unfathomable dignity, purpose, and glory. From the Desiring God website. Thanks for watching. Bye.